afternoon, everyone. My name is Shri Kumar. I'm a research scholar from Center for Women Studies. And today I'll be presenting my findings, which is from a pilot work which I have done in the last 6 months. And the title is Doing Feminist Ethnography, Ethical Dilemmas from the Field. Now, so I'll just divide my presentation for the next 10-15 minutes into 4 parts. Sure, ma'am. I'll keep it short. Now, so my area is, I'm trying to understand the manifestations of masculinity in school-going adolescents. Now, so the image is important, which I've used here. Now, I would like to invite you all to think of this particular song, School Chale Hum. It was an old song, School Chale Hum, and if you can bring some sense of nostalgia of imagining how was your school used to function, how was your school assembly. Now, keeping that at the back, now let's, so this particular, there's a chain of events which take place, and then I'll come to the ethical dilemma. So I'll be talking about 3 ethical dilemmas, but it's not like it's given in the book. So I reached to those dilemmas during the process of my own thinking. Now, so I'll be talking about, so the thought is there is ethics, then there is feminist ethics, which feminists tend to critique the meta-narratives of feminist knowledge, feminist philosophy, feminist ethics, and then in a funnel way, I'll move towards my topic, which is ethical dilemmas of doing feminist ethnography. Now, so the chain of events is, this is my understanding, I go on a field, I'll do ethnography, and I'll come back and collect data, and I'll write about it. The previous speaker has talked of anthropological intervention and how ethnography is, simplistically done, where you collect data. Now, the chain of event is when you enter, you ask for permission from the block education officer, you are denied that. School principal deny you for research. You introduce yourself, you are denied. So how do you begin your research? The moment you tell them your topic, you are denied. You want to study masculinity and violence, you are denied that. You are denied because you are a male, and one principal actually shared that she can't allow me to interact with adolescent girls. Why it's important that after a series of denial, you become aware of your own identities first. Somebody has talked of reflexivity. And I purposely chose a village which is my village, which I thought I'm an insider. And I have to acknowledge my position, social location here, that I come from a forward caste, English educated, I come from an engineering background. I did my my BTech in marine engineering. So I come from all the privileges which my friends call that all the privileges which Indian society can give. So I come with all those privileges. And still you are consistently denied those, access to the school. So the challenge begins with access. Now, what happens when you move towards the next? So this is a denied permission. There are multiple reasons to it. So I explore my own identity. Okay, I'm male, I'm unmarried, I'm from GNU, I'm a research scholar, I speak, this language, this is my topic. So this becomes more clearer. And then I'll move towards the next part, which is the second part. And this image I have shared again to keep a note that how the field looks like. So it's one school which ultimately gives me access, which is based on very personal rapport and trust building after taking place with the school principal. And what happens when you enter the field and you're observing the field? I'm an ethnographer. I'm supposed to observe. So when I observe what I observe, on a morning assembly starts at 8 o'clock, school bell rings, you enter the school with a heavy dose of nostalgia, School Chale Hum, Roke Se Na Roke Hum. And the moment assembly starts in the next 15 minutes, by the end of the assembly, the school PT teacher comes and slaps the entire 8th grade boys. and the person is visible in this picture. Now, this is the first dilemma, which begins with, who am I as a researcher? If you are somebody who believes in researcher being done in a very non-emotional, very objective, very rational, distance way of being a passive observant, then I'm coming back to the ethics, the school of ethics which you're talking about. You are being an observer. You probably will work from a utilitarian perspective. You'll think of producing research to benefit for maximum number of people, maximum good for maximum number, utilitarian school. Or are you a Kantian who would think that no, my means matter, my categorical imperative, it matters who I am and which means I take. Now this is where the first dilemma, and I like to emphasize on this, the first dilemma. I've called these three dilemmas. One is to speak or not to speak. To speak or not to speak. This is the first dilemma. Because if I speak, I see violence. I see violence by school teacher on students who are still not my subjects, who are still not my participant. I haven't even developed a rapport with them. I'm not in that stage where I feel emotionally connected to each one of them. But the fact that to speak or not to speak, so if you look at ethical dilemmas are different from challenges on the field. How are ethical dilemmas different? Challenges, there are multiple challenges. But ethical dilemma is the moment you choose one, it's not you're choosing between right and wrong. You are choosing between, there is a cost of what decision you are not taking. So it's basically choosing which gives you comfort, which kind of makes you feel at ease with yourself. Now, so the dilemma is to speak or not to speak. This is my first dilemma, because the moment I speak, I lose access to the school. I lose access to my project. I'm working in this very structured environment. Now, then you think more on the same line, and I'll invite you to stay with me on this, to speak or not to speak. Where does this come from? This comes from my dilemma of the methodology which I have chosen. Had I feminist research and feminist critique have talked about it, that if you are doing ethnography, and I'll bring it feminist ethnography here, you might, you might think that feminist ethnography is very novel. No, it's not, because you're trying to first develop the rapport, emotional bond, and then you could be equally more extractive than just collecting data. So coming back to the point that yes, to speak or not to speak comes from the methodological dilemma you have chosen. You have chosen an ethnography, you could have chosen participatory action research. If you chose participatory action research, you can actually voice and speak the injustice which you are seeing. And it's important for everybody who's working with any section, you speak on, you carry your politics with your academics. So there's no distinction between politics and academics, theory and practice, subject and object, all those binaries. Feminists speak against all those binaries. So feminist philosophy, feminist knowledge is against all these. So to say, there's a one book, if you can remember from today's reading, is Lindeman's work on Invitation to Feminist Ethics. She critiques all these standard Kantian school and utilitarian school, social context schools. So this is one. Now coming to the second dilemma is, first is to speak or not to speak, second is to ask or not to ask. To ask or not to ask. Since morning we are listening to informed consent, this is what consent is, but how do you obtain a consent from an adult? Not an adult, so adolescents, and especially look at the nuances, especially when you're working on violence, when you're supposed to get consent from the person in authority whose interest is in conflict with the person who you're trying to study. So you see the conflict of interest between the school administration, who is supposed to give me consent because adolescents can't consent, and then you're supposed to study violence on student. So this is my second dilemma, to ask or not to ask. Thankfully, there is a evolving reading on, there's a work by UNICEF on ERIC framework, which is called Ethical Research Involving Children, which do talk of adolescents can give consent if it is done in a very different sort of a minimal risk research, and evolving capacity of individuals needs to be acknowledged. So this is second dilemma, and then moving towards the third and the last dilemma, which is, So first is to speak or not to speak. First is to speak or not to speak. Second is to ask, not to ask. And the third is to show or not to show. So to show or not to show is where the dilemma is around deception. What is the deception? So it's connected. Deception